Hey everybody, Tyler from Valve News Network. Today, we are going to be doing something a bit different. This is the Ketchup Podcast, and I am joined with a confidant, friend, person that works with me a lot on videos, Jackathan Ewalds, otherwise known as Jackathan, in my videos and the community. Say hello, sir.
Hi, I do things when I want to.
Myself and Jackathan are going to be discussing a lot of what has happened over the last month in terms of Valve. July 2018 was not the most eventful month. However, there were a few things that need to be discussed a bit further, and that's the entire point of the Ketchup Podcast. So let's get started with this month's episode of the Ketchup Podcast. So, John, why don't you start us off with our first topic for today?
In somewhere in Dota 2, I can't remember where, there was a little file appeared in the tools called imported asset, and it is very clearly a Half-Life logo, but no one can tell if it says 2 or 3 on it. So there's been a lot of debate over since Tyler's video talking about it came out.
You actually brought my attention to this icon about 2.5 weeks before that video went live. Me personally, I'm obviously quite an optimist in the community, and I go towards the more positive outlook of the situation would be. And in this situation, I do think that it is a 3. Many people have, since the video come out, discussed it on r/Half-Life, discussed it on Facepunch, discussed it on 4chan. There's been discussions all over the place about what exactly that number is, and there have been tests conducted throughout the community regarding taking the Half-Life 2 icon and shrinking it down and comparing, taking a fan-made Half-Life 3 icon, shrinking it down and comparing, and it's inconclusive, to be completely honest, because everybody wants to be able to try and prove it wrong, because nobody wants to get back on this friggin' hype train of everybody wants off this ride. I have done my own research on it. I have done my own looking into things, and I stand by the idea that that is a 3 in the icon. However, John, you take a different approach with this.
Well, I did do the test where I took a full scale 2 logo and 3 logo, and I scaled them down, and all I can say is that you just can't tell at that resolution. The number takes up about 6 pixels, and you can't tell if it's 2 or 3.
It's inconclusive, is what you're saying.
Yes, it is completely inconclusive.
You're not saying one or the other. You're saying no one could know.
Yeah, you can't know from looking at it. You just have to sort of see what your mind wants you to see.
Yeah, so this logo showed up within the Common Tools folder of Dota 2 as import asset, and most people can assume, including myself, that the entire purpose of this is it's a Source 2 button to be able to import something Half-Life related. Maybe Source Engine, maybe Source 2 related, but it's importing assets into whatever the common tools of Source 2 are. I am of the idea that this logo is a 3, and if this does in fact have something to do with importing assets from Source Engine, then this 3 logo is of a late stage development, a late Source Engine development stage of Half-Life 3, which there is evidence of one's version of Half-Life 3 taking development space on Source Engine directly after Portal 2. But on the topic of future Half-Life games and leaks and that kind of thing, Mr. Ewald, why don't you walk us through our next topic?
In SteamVR Home a little bit later, there was an update that added a whole ton of strings and little names and stuff related to Half-Life VR, which is the well-rumored Half-Life VR title. It's been in development for how long?
June 2016, the original release of Valve's VR Destinations was the first time we saw HLVR.
Most of the strings had already been seen before in other Source 2 platforms, but most of them were added all at once into Steam VR Home, which could mean they're moving in that direction to try and bring all the Source 2 stuff, or bring all the Half-Life VR stuff into a more current Source 2 environment.
From the outside looking in, this game seems to have just be any other Valve project where things appear to be in some form of development but never progress past a prototyping stage. Because when you're leaked things, it's very difficult. When you're leaked code, especially, it's very difficult to be able to tell what stage of development this code is from. So essentially everybody usually has the idea of, well, this is prototyping or early alpha or pre-alpha or stuff like that. This has been in development for at least 2 years. There's evidence of VR games being in development, full development, since sometime in 2015. However, we do know that late 2014, early 2015, there were no games for VR in development because HTC actually came out and said something like, well, Valve is developing an exclusive Half-Life title. And Valve actually came out and said, no, we haven't started development on any big VR projects yet. We're still prototyping, we're still experimenting. But at most, that puts the game at about 3-year development cycle, and at the very least, it's a 2-year development cycle. So I think it's safe to assume that it's somewhere in the middle.
So this was the update where the imported asset was added. They added the little Half-Life icon, and they also added references to some particle effects. So these particle effects, we know the names of the files, and we know what they're called in like the tools. Obviously, we don't have them themselves. And the 3 of them that were added are particle snow, particle zen particulate, and particle dust motes. And, you got a file name called zen spore precipitation and zen spore precipitation outer. And then you got the same thing for dust motes. And they're also in a folder called rain effects. So it's some kind of rain in Half-Life VR.
It's some kind of precipitation effect that's done through particles. But yeah, this is like the first time Zen, I think, has been mentioned in any of these leaks directly, just stating Zen. There's really 2 explanations that I can think of when it comes to Zen being in it, and that's either part of this game takes place in Black Mesa, where like different Zen things kind of bleed into the science facility, or you're straight up in Zen.
It's sort of nice to think that maybe you get to visit Zen, and I'm sure, well, I think they probably visit Zen. I don't know why else this would be here. It makes you wonder what their interpretation of it looks like an actual Valve Source 2 Zen. I can't imagine it's too far different from Black Mesa's, but
I think it'd be funny if it was a completely different interpretation of the same
like
thing.
It looked completely different. That would be really interesting. I think that would be really interesting to see how the original company, but with none of the original people, then you have a bunch of fans working on an older engine, and they both look similar but completely different in style.
Particle snow. I mean, you could make that's far too generic. Like, okay, snow, it's in a rain effects folder, so it's some kind of precipitation.
Yeah, and the first thing you want to do is you want to connect that to Arctic, Borealis, or whatever, but it's just a thing you have when you're making rain effects. Like snow falls from the sky. That's just a thing that happens.
So then you have Zen Spore precipitation, but then you have Zen Spore precipitation outer.
Well, dust motes also has an outer. That could just be related to how the system is set up.
And then there's a few things that have been added since the last time I've taken a look at this. C markup volume tagged AI, C markup volume tagged AI HLVR, C entity instance, entity class, interactive debris, AI markup VR.
Half-Life.
So
I was gonna say Half-Life 2 already has a dedicated entity for dust motes, and like CS Militia uses it. That's like the only map I can think of that uses it is CS Militia.
The thing that's interesting to me is how it has to do with AI and the interaction of the debris with AI. What if it's like it's dusty and like an NPC around you like just kind of like waves their arm in front of it?
Like they have like a line of sight that matters with the dust and all that. That's possible. I mean, that's when you want to make like really advanced AI. That's kind of a next step is to interact with the environment like truly.
So the passenger physics push thing, the hell is that? What does that mean?
Well, the only thing I could think of with passengers would be like vehicle passengers, like. Episode 2 was big on that with Alex in the car.
But a physics push. So, like, the passenger themselves have an animation to push objects out of the way while also still being a passenger in a vehicle.
You could have, like, like speculation, but you have, like a character in a car who, like, is, like, clearing the way for you as you drive, like, dynamically.
Oh, okay. So it's not 2 people riding in the same car, but multiple cars.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen anything else related to vehicles, so who knows what that means.
So there's Vortigaunt stuff.
Glad to see them coming back.
Which is crazy, because this is the first time that Vortigaunts have gotten mentioned in anything. And so this is like the first official Vortigaunt mention, I think, since episode 2, to be completely honest.
Yeah. Half-Life 3.txt didn't have anything with Vorts.
No Vortigaunts in that. There are no Vortigaunts in the test bench. No Vortigaunts in Robot Repair or Steam VR or none of the. So this is the first time Vortigaunts have gotten a mention since Ep 2. So we have Start Hurt Glow, which I'm not sure what.
It could be if they get hurt, they glow, like to represent that. And obviously the zap stuff is self-explanatory. They power up and then they shoot.
Heal Glow makes sense. because that's what they do in Half-Life 2.
Yeah, they can. Well, they recharge your suit power, but it's the same thing.
And at one point, that was going to be something different, right, Jack? You want to talk
I
about
have a theory. Okay, in Half-Life 2, the Gauss gun was cut really, really late as a usable, playable player weapon.
How late?
I would say within 2 months of the game going gold, so September 2004, really late. There retail maps in the final game still reference the Gauss gun when you spawn. It tries to give you the Gauss gun, which shows how late it was. And there's this cut sequence in a Nova Prospect level where a Vortigaunt is supposed to charge your Gauss gun to let you blow open a cage that he's in. And I feel like the Vortigaunt armor charge feature might be a continuation of that because they didn't have the Gauss gun anymore, so they just made it through the suit power.
By the way, so here's an example of something that's already existed in the past. The zombie pop head crab. That is a thing from Source Engine, right?
I think so. I think there's a chance, I might be wrong, but I think there's a chance when you kill a zombie and you shoot it in the body, the head crab will come off and
yeah. Well, that's exactly what that is, but it's just was that exact named entity or
Well, it's just a function that happens. I don't have the code in front of me, but it might be called pop head crab for all I know.
Zombie toggle head.
That could be body group stuff, it's an animation, so that is
yeah,
weird.
Right. What the fuck is
it's
that?
Different heads that it goes between, or one or the other, because it's a toggle.
Well, if it's an animation thing, maybe it is back at Black Mesa, and it's you watch the head crabs attach onto bodies.
It's a good question. I think it would be cool to return to Black Mesa to see how they.
I would really love to see that. Oh man.
Like a full Source 2 envisioning of Black Mesa. It would be interesting.
So, going back to the list of leaks, we also have a.a. blind zombie sniff, which is a thing that happens in Half-Life 1. Zombies do sniff.
Well, NPCs can smell things, and it can use that to detect enemies. I think there are some enemies that they're marked as bad. They have bad sight, and they rely on smell more. But in gameplay, you really don't notice. But it is a thing there. It's more of a testament to Valve's attention to detail, even though you never notice it.
But this is it's an animation of the zombie sniffing. That's the AE prefix. So this is more of a thing. But this is obviously more having to do with the stealth mechanics that we mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I can totally see that where you're trying to stay still and you see the zombie come up to you and sniff your general area, something like that. I can totally see that being a really tense gameplay moment.
Blind zombies. You have to be quiet and not smelly.
Yeah, and maybe that has something to do with the pop head, the toggle head. Maybe certain zombies can see, certain zombies can't, depending on if there's a head crab on their head or not.
Yeah.
I mean,
we really don't know.
We're not going to know until they announce or release something. And I'm hearing things that it's this year, but I heard things it was last year, and I heard things it was the year before. So
that's every Valve behind the scenes
thing.
They say it'll be this year, and then they say it'll be next year,
and then you'll hear it'll get shelved. Yeah, just so many times. Uniform burst. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's not tied to an animation event or an act or anything. I mean, I think someone mentioned that it might be. It's not. It might be an entity, or it could be a command.
And also it's not uniform as in like a Barney would wear a uniform. It's just the burst is the same every time. It's
yeah, or it's the same in all directions or something.
Yeah, it's farther down you have break uniform burst, which breaks the function or entity. Yeah, it stops it. Volumetric fog support, that's self-explanatory. There's volumetric fog support. Act is a prefix that we've seen many times in the past. Act is something that the player does.
Well, no.
In VR.
Well, in VR, yes, but in history of Valve stuff, no.
History of Valve stuff, no. In this specific case, the descriptions of the Act VR commands almost always have to do with really polished and detailed interactions between the player and objects, and this is no different. It has to do with VR pistol long clip-in chamber and VR pistol long clip-in chamber, clip-in slide back. And that's just, if anybody's played something like H3 or Pavlov. It's just really detailed gun interactions, because this is a VR game, and the entire point, the biggest thing that many people have learned in VR is if you want to be able to keep a person immersed, anything that makes sense to be able to be done needs to be possible. If there's like an object in the world that the player walks up to and tries to pick up and it isn't possible to do that, you're immediately reminding the player that this is a game. You have Class Zen Foliage, which is once again another pretty direct Zen reference. This was actually the first one. This is from June 13th. This was the very first time we saw Zen referenced, I think, since Jesus. When was the last time Zen was referenced before that?
I don't think ever, if I'm...
Yeah, not since, like, Half-Life Source.
Well, I mean, characters, the way that they sort of got around Zen in Half-Life 2 was they made up some stuff about how Kleiner found out how to use this border world as a slingshot instead of having to go through it. And I thought it might be cool to revisit Zen. That's like the only mention is that someone talks about it in Half-Life 2. And so somehow Kleiner in his garage fixed it, and you just sort of gloss over that because they didn't want to make Zen for Half-Life 2.
Because Zen, they are very, very open, especially recently, about how Zen was the biggest disappointment of Half-Life 1. Valve says that. So then you have particle weapon effects, muzzle flash SMGs. That's pretty much just confirming that there will be an SMG. Wow, what a shock.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, prop HLVR weapon energy gun clip large. This is the fact that there's an energy gun in the game. Doesn't really surprise me whatsoever. Exactly what they mean by energy gun? Do they mean the Combine gun from HL2? Do they mean just like a general,
like a laser gun?
Yeah, doesn't matter. The thing that pops up once in a while is the idea of different sized clips. Large clips and small clips have been in the past. There's large pistol clips, there's large SMG clips in the past that have leaked, and now we have an energy gun with a clip, which is large. So there's different sizes of clips, and exactly how those tie into gameplay, I don't know. But I have a feeling that they're going to make the inventory system, quote unquote, the weapon bucket, make a little more sense. Maybe there will be a limit to the number of weapons the player can carry at one time, because there's a limit to the number of weapons you can attach to your body at one time, and maybe the different sizes of clips. Maybe it's like a little inventory management system like Deus Ex or something, but it's actually physical on your body. Like if you have large clips, yeah, you don't have to reload as much, but you don't have as much space for other stuff. Maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of in Half-Life 2. They originally had a system where all the weapons used like a centralized system of ammo, like large, medium, and small rounds. And you'd have to you didn't have artificial scarcity or inventory management, but if you ran out of small rounds, that's it for all the weapons that use that.
And then while we were recording this, I'm going to play a little bit of us finding it. But July 27th, there were some more stuff found. Jack, why don't you go over what was found, other than the logo? That's not new.
On the 26th, there was an update, and among all of the things added, they added references to a creature called a reviver. What it seems to be able to do, given that there is a sound called zombie revived, electrical buzz loop, it seems to me that the reviver will revive enemies and with electricity somehow, like a Frankenstein's monster kind of thing, and send them back into battle. Now, what that would look like in a Half-Life game, how that would fit stylistically, I don't know. It almost reminds me of like a Team Fortress thing. It mentions here an electric danger zone around the reviver. I guess that would be when it's reviving something. There's like an electrical field or something.
Something that I want to point out is that the one reference that we have to a particle shows a path, and it's Particle's creature's reviver, which means that truly there is an NPC creature called a reviver. This isn't just based off of, a zombie is revived and we're extrapolating the idea of a reviver. It is called the reviver within the files. Now, it's not called a zombie reviver.
It's not really a Valve idea of things being revived. However, in Half-Life 1, a cut feature was that Vortigons could revive fallen allies. Like, you kill a Vortigon and another one comes up and revives it, and it, jumps up back alive again. But that doesn't really mean anything. None of those people work there anymore, so it doesn't really matter.
Some of them do. But yeah.
Most of the people don't work there anymore. They probably don't remember something so specific.
And while mentioning that, I would like to talk about that a little bit. Most people, including myself in the past, have thought, well, old garb is gone, Valve that we love is dead. And to an extent, that's totally the case. But there's a lot of, and we'll probably touch on the Rich Geldrick stuff in a little bit, but there's a lot of people that go around and scream doom and gloom about Valve and how it's over and they're dead and there's a lot of internal problems and they'll never be able to recover from it. They can obviously recover at any moment. They really could. The issue is there's a lot of very deep systemic problems just in how Valve functions. And personally, I have heard things from people regarding Valve. About midway through 2017, they started having meetings talking about how they're self-aware in their issues and they want to fix their issues. And there were things put in place between late 2017 and now where they were like, okay, we really have to keep the last 10 years from happening again, which does give me some hope. Obviously, actions speak much louder than rumors. However, like, I have heard that from multiple people. Like, I have triangulated that fact that I have triangulated that rumor that Valve is aware of their issues and they're taking measures to correct them. But the idea of things like, Laidlaw's gone, Beckman's gone, Doug Wood's gone, Kelly Bailey's gone, your traditional Half-Life developers are mostly gone.
But I should also say, most of the longtime level designers are still there. Like Aaron Barber, Dario Casali, David Spare, Dave Riller, Randy Lundeen. These people made some of the most amazing set pieces in Half-Life 1 and 2 and the episodes and Portal 2, and they still work there.
But no, yeah, so I mean, we've pretty much gone over everything that has leaked in HLVR, but the final thoughts on HLVR before we move on. I have high hopes for it. I have heard that Valve currently has, and John, you've heard similar things from other people, that Valve currently has a few late-stage development things in-house. Like Greg Kumar in October 2016 said 3 VR games, and no, he said when we talk about stuff next year, no one in this room will be unhappy, and that's almost been 2 years ago.
And we're still unhappy.
And we're still unhappy. I try not to be old Valve News Network where I show my optimism. I try and make myself unbiased, and that usually comes off as cynical because people are used to the optimistic Valve News Network, and the optimistic VNN is legitimately who I am, right? But you got to be unbiased. But this is a podcast, so from a personal standpoint, I am quite hopeful for the future of the company. It'll never get back to the point of them releasing game-changing things every year. It'll never get back to that. However, you have to realize that I'm of the mindset that the only real problem is Gabe. And I've not really talked about this, and I probably won't go into it, but I have a theory that one of the major issues is just the cult of Gabe. I really think that Gabe should step down, give Eric Johnson or somebody else the reins and see where the company can go. The whole idea, and I guess we'll just go into the Rich Geldrick stuff. But the whole idea of all the stuff that Rich Geldrick, in case you guys don't, John, can you, just explain what the hell I'm talking about?
Okay, Rich Geldrick was a guy who worked at Valve from 2011 to 2014, which is around the time Portal 2 launched and when CSGO launched and was announced. And so that was a lot of people think that's the last time Valve was doing anything because of Portal 2 and such. And he wrote hundreds of tweets about his experience at a self-organizing company. And he never says it's Valve because he wanted to avoid press attention. That really worked out for him. But if you looked on his LinkedIn, the only company that could be described as self-organizing was Valve. So every time he mentioned that, it was probably Valve.
There's one tweet in particular that really, really affected me. Other than find the creator of smaller press outlets and wine and dine them. That one hurt. But the one that really affected me was the idea of leaking fake employee handbooks that make the company look a hell of a lot better than it actually is. And he worked there around the time the first employee handbook leaked in the first place. Now what's funny is Valve hosts that handbook directly on their website. They leaked it, quote unquote. It's a PR piece. It's a PR piece to be able to number one, convince the public that they're great, and number two, convince potential employees to work at Valve and trick them into working there. Now, I do want to stress one thing that I've learned in my research, and that is Rich Geldrick worked during the worst period of time at Valve. Period. The worst time. He worked from 2011 to 2014. The first massive layoff took place in the middle of his work. I've heard many stories about the 2013 layoffs, and I guess now we can publicly talk about it because Rich just talked about it. There was this thing that happened where there was a massive disagreement between essentially two different, I'm going to call them, branches of the company, resulting in essentially one of the branches, which was like half the company at the time, just getting canned.
The thing about Rich's tweets is that he makes it sound like it's all calculated by the executives or the executive. And I don't know, I don't really buy that, but I feel like what he's saying is accurate, that it was like that. But whether or not it was on purpose, I can't say.
I can personally speak to the idea of Valve does not have the ability, even the highest ranking employees, because there are ranks. There is a directing arm that totally exists. It's Gabe Newell, Doug Lombardi, Eric Johnson. There's one other guy I forget the name of, Robin Walker, and there's like people there that totally have power over everybody else because, I mean, it's Gabe Newell, Eric Johnson, Doug Lombardi, Robin Walker. Come on, like, of course. You know, here's my argument as to why it's not always cold and calculated months ahead of time, because they're never able to do any kind of third-party relationship ever. If it was truly a company that was so like cynical and conniving and planning, to be able to think that Valve inserts people like Fallout 4 Institute situations to like control employees months ahead of time, if they were really capable of planning that far ahead to control their own employees, I have a feeling that things like The Crossing or one of the third-party Half-Life episodes or Turtle Rock in general would have been handled a little better.
Well, Gabe certainly has all the power. He can do whatever he wants with anyone. I'm sure other people have like lesser power, like you were talking about with Eric Johnson, Doug Lombardi. I feel like Gabe, I don't know how apt he is to use the power to cancel anything. Like we don't really have a way to know that. And my first thought is to think he doesn't use it that much, but he could, for all I know. And the thing that Rich said about taking the small press out to Wine and Dine was kind of depressing, because that's what they did with you, like February of last year.
Valve ain't going to Gamescom. I'm still seeing articles pop out by some quote-unquote journalists about how Valve may be attending Gamescom because Valve GmbH is on the attendees list. However, I mean, like, it's a limited liability company specifically there for tax and legal reasons.
Yeah, it's just there so they have to pay less taxes. They set up a company in a country where foreign companies are taxed by their home country and not by the host. So, like, if Valve were to have a branch in Germany, they would have to be taxed, like, by American law. But America says that American companies overseas must be taxed by the company they're in. So Valve sets up a little fake company in Germany. They don't have to pay taxes in America, and they don't have to pay taxes in Germany, because it's like an American company and also an American company in a foreign country. So no one pays any taxes. So on the subject of Gamescom, I can see why people might think Valve would be at Gamescom, because Valve has a big history with Gamescom in the past. Like, for example, Portal was like first shown at Gamescom in like 12 years ago, and the next year they showed TF2. And in 2008, they had a big Left 4 Dead tent, and you got to play that there. And, like, you can see the connection. Like, Valve has gone to Gamescom to announce big things. So, or at least show big things. So when you see Valve's name on the Gamescom roster, you immediately jump to be like, what are they doing there? But it's not real Valve.
And the thing that nobody pointed out, and I didn't even realize this until I just connected the dots, the International is the same weekend as Gamescom. So, like, the International is slowly turning into, like, BlizzCon, but for Valve. I mean, you still have the Dota 2 competition, but you have, like, everybody at Valve there talking about stuff. And last International, we had leaks about CSGO stuff, and we had leaks about some VR stuff because just people were talking to Valve employees. So yeah, I imagine a day in a couple of years when Valve has released the things they're currently working on where the International kind of turns into a Valve convention. Something that I want to talk about, though, is this gigantic Steam scam that's going on. This kind of just came out of nowhere yesterday, the 30th. We're filming this on the 31st. So there was this game. I don't remember the name, and I don't need to know the name. There were items attached to this game for the work within the Steam inventory stuff that looked almost identical to very expensive items for CSGO and TF2. Oh shit, a knife or an Australian rocket launcher or something for like items that are far less valuable than those. But it's a scam because those aren't real. They just look like they're real. At one, like before this became a really big issue, it would say that it wasn't, it was like a TF2 item, but it would tell you that it was from a game that wasn't TF2. What ended up happening was, because of Steam Direct's because of Valve's hands off with Steam Direct, these scammers were able to figure out a way to disguise the game title. So what you ended up having was games that weren't publicly available on Steam having names like Team Fortress 2 and icons of TF2 for Team Fortress 2 items. And so people were getting scammed left and right because of this this hands-off approach that Valve has with Steam, which for the most part makes sense. They don't want to they want to let capitalism do its thing. But when you let capitalism do its thing, you also have the seedy underbelly of capitalism where people try to abuse the system. And this is that case. So what happened was the original game that pulled this trick was pulled off of Steam, but now you have about 15 other games pulling this trick, doing it much better as well. They're actually disguising their game titles, and so now what they're doing is warning the player that the item that they're trading for is from a game they've never played before, and linking to the game's page even if it's not public on Steam. That's not a solution. That's a Band-Aid. And once again, it's an example of the Steam team showing its size. Everybody gives the Steam team a bunch of crap, but I want to stress that the Steam team is not that big. The Steam team is not the biggest team at Valve. It's a smaller-ish team, and expecting like 10 people, some of which are only there to be able to be like PR, to filter through everything that Steam is unreasonable, but that's not an excuse. And if Valve truly wanted Steam to be the best platform it could be, then they would have to hire people specifically for Steam and have like the Steam, like a completely separate building specifically for Steam. They would need to do it a hell of a lot better. So I want to talk a little bit about good community-made content of this month, and I'd like you to lead off on this. Is there anything you've seen this month that's really impressed you?
The one thing that I seen that I did really enjoy was Operation Black Mesa's update. So Operation Black Mesa is a mod that is like Black Mesa, but it's for opposing force, and they have a different mod called Guard Duty, which shares assets, which is Blue Shift. They moved to the Counter-Strike Global Offensive branch of Source, which I'm really excited for because that is a very advanced version of the engine. Has a lot of like cool lighting effects and a lot higher limits just in terms of models and just textures. All the limits are raised on that version.
Other stuff that I saw that I really liked. I talked about a lot of it. Community catch up. Jabroni Brawl was great. The other thing that I really want to touch on is Run Think Shoot Live is always a website that people really should be paying attention to if they're a big Half-Life fan and they want more content. That's something I really want more people to know about. I feel like even though Philip is the most prolific community member I could possibly think of, he definitely does not get as much credit as he deserves for like preservation of custom content.
Yeah, he is a stickler for preserving every Half-Life custom-made thing.
So for those that don't know, if you don't know, there's a website called Run Think Shoot Live, and it is a library of what I think we can guess to be like 80% of every piece of custom content ever made for a Half-Life related thing that was ever made public.
In levels, custom levels.
In terms of levels, custom levels. And it's an incredible website. He'll come up with different ideas for mapping challenges. Like, you're only allowed to have a room of this dimension. You have to make a level out of this small of a room, or it has to be themed around this idea. And he'll put up money, like hundreds of dollars multiple times a year.
NECA toys and ECA toys.
Yeah, he really, and to be completely honest, some of the stuff that gets put into those contests are not great, but I've never played, they're called VILs. I've never played a mapping challenge by Run Think Shoot Live that doesn't have at least one phenomenal piece of custom content. There's some real talent out there that Valve should pull from if they ever do start publicly talking about game development again.
You know what could be fun, just unrelated to this podcast? If we took all the VILs going all the way back as far as we can go, and like taking the best one or two maps out of it and like stringing them all together. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, that'd be cool, but we would only really be able to use it for personal use.
Well, yeah, we could ask Philip about it.
We'd have to ask Philip, and
then we'd have to ask all the people who made each one. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
Maybe.
That'd be fun.
Philip could totally do it. He could be like Vil's greatest hits or something.
It'd be like another Half-Life game.
You would
just
have
with
to
no continuity.
Yeah, but I mean, Half-Life 2 through its development had no continuity between its levels until one point where they were like, okay, it's in this order now.
We gotta do it. Come on.
We gotta make transitions now. That's literally how Half-Life 1 was. That's how every Half-Life game was made.
Yeah, they just make set pieces and they prototype gameplay and then they just throw them together towards the end.
Yeah, and somehow it's turned out excellent every time, other than maybe Episode 1.
Episode 1 was alright.
Episode 1's good. After replaying it so many times.
But when you compare it to Episode 2, it's like, well...
And if you compare it to Half-Life 2, it's nowhere near.
Well, it wasn't meant to be. That's the thing.
Yeah. So something that I do want to talk about is, so what do I think is going to happen for August? I have a feeling that August is going to be a pretty big month for Valve, mostly because of the International. And as a person that isn't very interested in the Dota 2 competitive scene or esports in general, I don't feel like esports have a place on my channel. I cover the Valve content. The International always is a place where they make gigantic Dota 2 announcements. You know, they announced the Dueling Fates update last year. They announced Artifact last year. And we're coming very close up on the 1-year anniversary of Artifact's announcement. And to be completely honest, we have had one big info dump on March 9th, and then ever since then it's been little drip feeds of leaks. At one point back in March, Valve was talking about how there was going to be an open beta, or at least a much larger expanded closed beta that people are aware of in the spring. That did not come to fruition, or it might have just been a misreported piece of information by the many different journalists that were at the event. The best place, it's looking like that the actual next big chunk of information we're going to get about Artifact will be at the International. I also think that Valve might be slowly turning the International into like a BlizzCon or a QuakeCon, but for Valve. And it would be, I mean, you have all eyes on Valve. This is the most financially successful esports convention, esports competition thing. And if Valve wanted a lot of eyes to be able to announce a VR title or an engine thing, like, this is the best place for Valve to make any kind of public announcement, is at the International. They did it with Artifact to quite negative reception, and to be completely honest, it seems like they don't care if it's a negative reception. They just care if there's a conversation going on. Look, they're up against a very large uphill battle when it comes to announcing the next Half-Life title and it being VR exclusive. I mean, Jack, I think you could see it now.
If you wall off so much of the player base, of the fan base, for a new Half-Life title, people are going to be upset. And it won't be pretty, because people are going to say that, like, Valve has, like, sold out to VR, or they're just going to say it's, like, a gimmick and it, like, ruined the game. You just have stuff like that from, like, all corners. And it's not, I wouldn't say that's really an accurate representation of it, because it's not like a sequel. It's a VR game using the IP, right? But people are going to view it as the next Half-Life game, which I don't think it really should be.
And I have a feeling that there's going to be a tournament. I have a feeling that part of the International will be a Artifact tournament, because a lot of the people that currently have access to the closed beta are professional Hearthstone players, professional Dota 2 players, and they're hosting weekly online. They're hosting like frequent online tournaments in the closed beta itself, and they're testing a lot. If one of the VR games is set in the Dota 2 universe, we are definitely getting an announcement during the International. As for anything else, right before I started recording this podcast, I got some information on, and this is unconfirmed, so it's a rumor. TF2 Workshop contributors have had items purchased for the game. They have had items for a supposed summer major update. I don't want this to be a 9-6 situation. I don't want people like dancing in the streets thinking, oh, we're getting a summer update, like a big major TF2 summer update. I am hearing from 3 different people that Valve has picked out some workshop items for a summer update. Now, that could just be another rainy day cosmetic case situation. However, I feel like Valve has set themselves up, the TF team has set themselves up to be able to create major updates a lot quicker. You really just need new maps. You need like 2 or 3 new weapons. and you need some cases, and you have the contractor already set up to accept a whole bunch of different rows of contracts. So I don't think that just setting up new contracts would be that difficult. Jungle Inferno has laid the base for a much easier pipeline of development content. So I am, like, a day after I put up the we're not hearing anything about the next major update, is there a next major update for TF2, I'm starting to hear stuff again. So is there a next major update? I'm hearing that Valve has already approved some items in the workshop for a summer update. Hopefully it's more than just a cosmetic case for the summer. The one thing that I do think Valve really needs to do with TF2 is an actual launch of the competitive mode. Meet Your Match was a nightmare. You need to do a public relaunch. The Blue Moon update was like a soft relaunch of a beta, and now we need, like, all hands on deck. Let's promote the hell out of this. The competitive mode is here with incentives to play it, with the trickle-down professional balance stuff that Banny and Uncle Dane talk about. There's a lot you need to do there. And then the only other thing I'd like to talk about before we sign off is what I personally have planned for August. And the first thing we're going to be doing to open August with, aside from this podcast, is the first Lever project being released since last year. We are finally releasing another Lever project. It'll be out. One of the first videos of August will be about Beta Episode 1. And Jack and I and the rest of Lever have been working very hard on a lot of different things, and the Episode 1 project the build is done, right, Jack? It's been done for like a week and a half, and I'm just working on the video, and yeah, so look forward to that.
I played Episode 1 way more than I ever wanted to.
Yeah, me too. But we're done for the most part. I just need to get the video done, and that'll be out. Half-Life's Prey will come out in August. And then we're also going to open August with a Counter-Strike News Network, because that's the only other one that I need. Oh, there's also Steam stuff. I have a couple videos planned. I just need to get caught up with all the news and all the projects that are done. That includes Half-Life's Prey. That includes History of Episode 1, Unused Content of Episode 1. And something that I do want to talk about a little bit is that once I'm in a state where I'm caught up with all of the news going on, I'll start experimenting with other stuff. So once I'm caught up with the news, you might see a Nintendo News Network video or a Bethesda News Network video put on Valve News Network. That totally will happen. So yeah, that's about it. I think we've covered pretty much everything we've wanted to cover, right? But yeah, if you like this format, if you like this kind of stuff, let us know. We would like to be able to have guests on. So if you're a member of the Valve community that's fairly prolific or well known and you'd like to be on this podcast, feel free to reach out. Yeah. So if there's anything you'd like to be able to see, if there's anything you'd like to be able to see talked about next month, if you don't want to see this podcast, you can unsubscribe. And thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler, and who are you?
You know, sometimes I forget that myself, Tyler. But I'm pretty sure my name is Jonathan.
All right. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. It's been the Ketchup Podcast for July 2018. But thanks, everybody. Peace and hair grease. Doop 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 doop.